One of the wonderful unintended consequences of physical distancing is that time and space don't seem to matter quite so much anymore. So we can have people like Reverend Sally White, who grew up at East Shore, join us. Normally on Sunday mornings, she's preaching in her own congregation, hundreds of miles from here. It kind of surprised me when she talked about a run on seeds and chicks, like the bank runs of the Depression. But it shouldn't have. A month ago, as we were preparing for the worst case scenario, my dear husband, who is no outdoorsman, for the first time in his life decided that he should plant a garden from seed. He practically cleaned out the home improvement store of peppers, tomatoes, beans, arugula, carrots, and a bunch of other things, all of which are sprouting now in the window of our dining room. Even without the urgency of our time, though, spring is a time of renewal, rebirth. That's why we celebrate Easter this time of year. It's the perfect marriage of religious symbolism and natural symbolism. And this is the morning when Christians around the world celebrate the ascension into heaven of Jesus, the Christ sent to earth to lead the people and fulfill the prophecies of old. The focus on Easter morning is the empty tomb, discovered by his mother Mary, Mary Magdalene, and the other women who are unnamed in the story. It's a story of hope that the teacher, the rabbi, didn't die in vain, but instead lives on in service and leadership. But none of that story could happen without the backstory, a story that comes to a dramatic climax during the last week of Jesus' life, from the time he enters Jerusalem on Palm Sunday through his gruesome death on Good Friday. As soon as Jesus triumphantly enters the city, he knows that there will be trouble, and that will lead to his end. On Thursday night, at the supper that he says will be his last in this life, he tells his disciples that they will all forsake him in some way. Now they protest, of course, feeling like they never will. But the Rabbi Jesus, being an astute student and teacher of human behavior, knows better. He can see what is coming. Before he dies, even as he's mocked by King Herod and flogged brutally by Pontius Pilate's guards, as town people watch, cheering, he's already forgiven all of his disciples, including Judas. You see, Jesus knows that Judas sold him out for 30 silver pieces, to be exact. And at the supper whispers to him, "Go ahead, do what you have to do." Judas leaves the group, and from a distance follows Jesus and the disciples all night and reports their whereabouts back to the Pharisees. Finally, in the waning hours of the night before dawn, Judas leads the soldiers to the garden where Jesus has been telling his disciples all night, "This is the new commandment. Love each other as I have loved you." Judas approaches Jesus and kisses him as a signal to the soldiers who they should nab. It's literally the kiss of death. And Jesus has already forgiven him. He's so at peace, so calm as he's apprehended that it's shocking to the soldiers. That kind of humble resignation is rare. The march to his death is pure torture. After going through the whole range of normal human emotion, Jesus looks to the sky and says, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." Moments later, the sky goes black and becomes foreboding. Jesus' life energy is almost completely spent. He looks up again and says, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." He takes his last breath, and at the same moment, the skies open up. The earth shakes. Boulders crack. The curtain that veils the inner sanctuary of the temple in Jerusalem tears. Tombs open up. Now, I know it's probably a fairly dangerous thing to do this morning of all mornings, but I'm not claiming any of this to be factually correct. Fact here matters less than truth. The truth, the moral, the lesson we should live by is that humanity and the very planet we live on are fractured when we treat each other abusively, in self-service and fear, because we are all children of the creative force of the universe. We all are creators of our own destiny in concert with that force. Our actions have the power to destroy as well as create. But today is Easter, the celebration of the day when the women go to Jesus' tomb and find it empty. Mary Magdalene goes immediately to tell the 11 disciples that have regrouped. Jesus' mother, Mary, wanders slowly, pensively back to the garden where her son spent his last night alive. The women who stay behind, the unnamed women, receive a message of hope in the form of a young man glowing in the soft light reflected on his immaculately brilliant white robes. He's the messenger of a new beginning, a new faith, a new hope for the future of humanity after its fracturing, a new way of treating each other, and the world will never be the same again. Can you imagine yourself in the position of these women, bearing witness to something so harmless at its face, a man in white robes in a cave, and yet knowing that his very presence will change your life and the world, everything, forever? For better or worse, times of destruction and chaos can be the times of immense creativity and healing. Nothing will ever be the same. The power of Jesus' story lies in his forgiving everyone, his disciples, the people who persecute him, even Judas who betrayed him, Judas whose name is so synonymous with treachery that in some parts of the world it's illegal to give his name to a child. The power of Easter, I think, is in the renewal that comes when the humble forgive the fearful. And ultimately, that's what Jesus of Nazareth was, humble. Strong enough to be a prophet, and yet self-knowing enough to accept his destiny, no matter how painful, because it was, after all, a destiny that he helped to create. Jesus' death and resurrection was a bit like kintsugi. Lives and the earth itself shattered, torn apart, left with gaping fissures. And the fix is as brilliant as the white robe, as magical as the resurrection, and as valuable as the gold used to reunite the shards of a teacup. Love each other as I have loved you is the message. Forgive each other as I have forgiven you. May it be so.
White coral bells upon a silver stalk, lilies of the valley deck my garden walk. Oh, don't you wish that you could hear them ring? That will happen only when the fairies sing. White coral bells upon a silver stalk, lilies of the valley deck my garden walk. White coral bells upon a silver stalk, lilies of the valley deck my garden walk. Oh, don't you wish that you could hear them ring? That will happen only when the fairies sing.